The bitter wind swept through the crowded streets of New York City, sending a shiver through the man huddled in the shadows of a skyscraper. The man's name was Harold, but on the streets, he was known simply as Hank. Hank had lived this way for years, surviving on scraps and the kindness of strangers. His face was weathered from the elements, his hands calloused from countless cold nights spent gripping a threadbare blanket. Today was just another day of trying to scrape together enough for a cup of coffee or maybe a sandwich. Just enough to keep him going for one more day. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Hank shuffled through the crowd, his eyes scanning for a kind face, someone who might spare some change. He wasn't proud of it, but pride didn't fill an empty stomach. Across the street, he spotted a small group of people gathered in front of a sleek black car. Cameras flashed, and passers-by whispered in hushed tones. Curious, Hank edged closer, clutching his battered paper cup, hoping for a chance to ask for help. At the center of the commotion stood a tall man with a familiar shock of blonde hair and an unmistakable air of authority. It was Donald Trump, the real estate mogul and media personality known for his larger-than-life persona. Hank had seen Trump's face countless times on television and in newspapers. He'd heard the name bandied about in discussions of wealth, power, and controversy. To Hank, Trump was a symbol of a world that seemed impossibly out of reach, a world of penthouses and private jets. As Trump spoke animatedly with a member of his entourage, Hank hesitated, unsure if he should approach. The moment felt surreal. What were the odds of a homeless man coming face to face with one of the richest and most recognizable figures in the country? But hunger and desperation have a way of overriding hesitation. Summoning his courage, Hank stepped forward, weaving through the throng of onlookers until he stood just a few feet from Trump. "Excuse me," Hank's voice cracked, barely audible over the noise of the crowd. Trump's piercing blue eyes turned toward him, and for a moment, the entire scene seemed to freeze. The cameras stopped clicking, the whispers ceased, and all eyes were on the disheveled figure standing before the billionaire. "Can you spare $1?" Hank asked, his voice steadying despite the lump in his throat. His question was simple, direct, an everyday plea that carried the weight of his struggles. Trump's expression shifted, his usual confident smirk giving way to something more inscrutable. He studied Hank for a long moment, his gaze flicking over the man's tattered clothes, the lines etched into his face, the humility in his stance. Then, to everyone's surprise, Trump reached into the pocket of his overcoat and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. The crowd gasped audibly as Trump held the bill between his fingers. $1? Trump said, his voice carrying the sharp edge of incredulity. "Is that all you're asking for?" Hank blinked, unsure how to respond. The question was rhetorical, but it hung in the air like a challenge. Trump stepped closer, his larger-than-life presence nearly overwhelming. "You don't need $1, Trump continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "You need a chance." The crowd murmured, a mixture of intrigue and disbelief rippling through the onlookers. Hank felt his heart race, unsure where this was going. Trump handed the $100 bill to Hank, who stared at it as if it were a mirage. "Take this," Trump said, "but I want you to listen carefully. You see this building behind me?" He gestured to the towering structure with his name emblazoned in gold letters. "This is Trump Tower. I built this. I made this happen. And do you know how? By working harder than anyone else, by thinking bigger than anyone else, and by taking risks when others wouldn't." Hank nodded slowly, still clutching the bill. Trump's tone was neither patronizing nor condescending. It was almost as if he were speaking to a business associate. "I'll give you something better than $1, Trump said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone that made Hank lean in despite himself. "I'll give you an opportunity." The crowd erupted in whispers again, phones held aloft to capture every word of the unexpected interaction. Trump gestured to a man standing nearby, one of his assistants. The man stepped forward, a curious expression on his face. "This is Ron," Trump said. "He works for me. Tomorrow morning I want you to meet him here. 9 o'clock sharp. You'll have a suit, a haircut, and a job interview. If you show up and you're serious, we'll see what you're made of." Hank's mouth fell open, the words sinking in slowly. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? A publicity stunt? But Trump's expression was earnest, his tone unwavering. He meant it. "Let me tell you something," Trump added, his voice rising with conviction. "Success isn't just about money, it's about mindset. You've got to believe you can rise above your circumstances. Show me you've got the guts to do that, and you won't need to ask for $1 ever again." The crowd broke into applause, though a few skeptical murmurs persisted. Trump turned to leave, the moment already becoming a legend in the making. Hank stood frozen, the $100 bill clutched tightly in his hand, his mind racing. Was this the break he'd been waiting for? Or just another false promise in a life full of them? That night, Hank sat in a quiet corner of a shelter, staring at the bill and replaying the encounter in his mind. Could he really pull himself together in less than a day? The doubt was there, gnawing at the edges of his resolve, but so was something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, Hank arrived at Trump Tower just as the city was beginning to stir. True to his word, Ron was waiting for him, holding a garment bag and a pair of shiny leather shoes. Hank was whisked inside, past marble floors and gleaming chandeliers, to a private suite where a team of stylists and barbers transformed him. When he looked in the mirror, he hardly recognized the man staring back. By the time Hank sat down for his interview, he felt like a new person. The questions were tough, probing his skills, his experience, and his willingness to adapt. But Hank answered with honesty and determination, drawing on years of survival and resourcefulness. When the interview concluded, Ron handed him a card. "Welcome to the team," Ron said, a hint of a smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "You start Monday." Hank's journey didn't end there, of course. The road from homelessness to stability was long and filled with challenges. But that day marked a turning point, the first step toward reclaiming his life. And as word of the encounter spread, it became a story that resonated far beyond the streets of New York. A story of an unlikely moment of connection between two men from vastly different worlds. A story of hope, resilience, and the power of taking a chance. Trump, for his part, faced both praise and criticism for his actions. Some called it a publicity stunt, while others saw it as a rare glimpse of humanity behind the bravado. But for Hank, it didn't matter what others thought. What mattered was that someone had seen him, not just as a homeless man, but as a person worth investing in. In the months and years that followed, Hank worked tirelessly, proving to himself and others that he was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. He found a small apartment, reconnected with estranged family members, and even began mentoring others who were struggling to find their footing. And every so often, when he passed Trump Tower, he'd pause and smile, remembering the day his life changed with a single shocking response to a humble request. Hank's life began to transform in ways he had never dared to dream. The job that Donald Trump had facilitated was not just a lifeline, it was an opportunity for him to reshape his destiny. Trump's team had placed Hank in an entry-level position within one of Trump's many ventures, managing logistics for a property maintenance division. At first, the work was grueling and Hank often felt out of his depth, but for the first time in years, he felt purpose and stability. He had a place to go every day, tasks to accomplish, and people who depended on him. What stood out most to Hank was how much he could adapt when given the chance. Years of surviving on the streets had equipped him with resourcefulness, resilience, and a sharp intuition for problem solving. It didn't take long for his supervisors to notice his potential. Within 6 months, Hank was promoted to a role with more responsibility, overseeing a small team. But the challenges didn't stop with work. Hank still wrestled with the emotional weight of his past. Memories of the nights he had spent sleeping in alleyways, wondering if he would make it through another winter, haunted him. Though his circumstances had improved, he carried the scars of loneliness, hunger, and despair. He found himself grappling with imposter syndrome, questioning whether he truly deserved this second chance. Trump's initial gesture had been grand, but the day-to-day grind of rebuilding his life fell squarely on Hank's shoulders. The turning point came one evening after a long day at work. Hank sat in his modest studio apartment, staring at the card Ron had given him during his first interview. Below Ron's name and title was a number he hadn't thought much about, a hotline for employee support. Feeling overwhelmed, Hank dialed the number. He didn't expect much, maybe a few words of encouragement or a script read by a stranger on the other end. What he got was something different entirely. The person who answered was a counselor who specialized in working with individuals facing significant life changes. She listened as Hank poured out his fears, his doubts, and the weight of his experiences. Instead of dismissing his concerns, she validated them and helped him see the strength it had taken to get this far. She connected him with resources for therapy and personal development, and for the first time, Hank felt like he wasn't just surviving, he was healing. At work, Hank's progress continued to draw attention. Ron, who had initially been skeptical about bringing a homeless man into such a high-profile organization, became one of Hank's biggest advocates. During a quarterly review meeting with Trump himself, Ron highlighted Hank's performance as a success story that stood out even among seasoned professionals. Trump, never one to shy away from acknowledging when he was right, decided to meet with Hank again. This time, the The setting was far removed from the streets where their paths had first crossed. Hank was invited to a formal dinner at one of Trump's properties, where high-ranking executives gathered to discuss the company's future strategies. Hank arrived at the event feeling out of place among the glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors. But when Trump greeted him, the same intensity that had struck Hank during their first encounter was still there. "I hear you're doing well," Trump said, clapping Hank on the back. "You're proving a lot of people wrong, including yourself, I bet." Hank nodded, the words catching in his throat. Trump's directness had a way of cutting through pretense, and Hank appreciated that. Over the course of the evening, Trump asked Hank about his life before they'd met, probing not out of condescension but out of genuine curiosity. "What kept you going out there?" Trump asked. "When everything was against you?" Hank thought for a moment before answering. "I think it was the belief that something better had to be out there, even if I couldn't see it. If I gave up, I'd never know what might have been." Trump leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. "That's the mindset that makes people succeed. You held on to hope when most people would have quit. That's rare, Hank. Don't lose it." The conversation left Hank inspired but also deeply reflective. He realized that his story was no longer just about survival. It was about creating a life that could inspire others. He began volunteering in his spare time, speaking at shelters and community centers about his journey. He shared the lessons he had learned about resilience, self-belief, and the importance of taking opportunities, no matter how improbable they might seem. As Hank's confidence grew, so did his ambitions. He enrolled in evening classes to learn more about business management, determined to climb higher in his career. The process was daunting. Balancing work, study, and his personal life often felt like walking a tightrope, but Hank thrived under pressure, drawing on the strength he had built over years of hardship. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Within 2 years, Hank was promoted again, this time to a managerial role overseeing multiple properties. He had become a respected figure within the organization, known for his work ethic, empathy, and ability to navigate challenges with grace. Meanwhile, his public story continued to resonate. Media outlets picked up on the unusual narrative of a homeless man whose chance encounter with Donald Trump had changed the course of his life. Hank was invited to speak on talk shows, participate in podcasts, and even write guest columns about his experiences. Though he was initially hesitant about the attention, he saw it as an opportunity to shine a light on the struggles of homelessness and the potential for redemption. Through his advocacy, Hank began to see how much work still needed to be done for people in situations like the one he had escaped. He collaborated with nonprofit organizations, using his platform to raise awareness and funding for initiatives that provided housing, job training, and mental health support. He became a voice for the voiceless, determined to give back in the same way he had been given a chance. Trump, ever the opportunist, saw the potential in Hank's growing public profile. He invited Hank to participate in a panel discussion on leadership and overcoming adversity hosted at one of Trump's flagship properties. The event drew a diverse audience, from business leaders to social workers, all eager to hear the story that had captured so many hearts. When Hank took the stage, he spoke with a clarity and passion that belied his humble beginnings. He shared not just his gratitude for the opportunity Trump had given him, but also the deeper lessons he had learned along the way. He emphasized the importance of empathy, persistence, and the willingness to believe in people, even when they couldn't yet believe in themselves. "Everyone has the potential to change their circumstances," Hank said, his voice steady and resolute. "But it takes more than a single act of kindness. It takes a system of support, opportunities, and belief. I was lucky to meet someone who gave me that chance, but we need to create a world where people don't have to rely on luck to survive." The speech earned a standing ovation, with even Trump rising from his seat to applaud. Later, Trump approached Hank and in his characteristic way offered a wry smile. "You've come a long way, Hank," he said, "but don't get comfortable. The moment you stop striving for more is the moment you start falling behind." The words stayed with Hank, a reminder that his journey was far from over. Over the years, Hank continued to rise within the ranks of Trump's organization, eventually taking on a role that allowed him to shape company policy. He championed initiatives to provide training and employment opportunities for individuals facing barriers to work, ensuring that others like him would have a pathway to success. But Hank's influence extended beyond the corporate world. He founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing homelessness, combining his lived experience with the skills he had developed in his career. The organization quickly gained traction, partnering with local governments and private businesses to create sustainable solutions for housing and employment. Through it all, Hank remained grounded, never forgetting the moment that had sparked his transformation. He often revisited the streets where he had once lived, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of how far he had come. Each time he encountered someone in need, he saw a reflection of his former self and felt a renewed commitment to making a difference. One cold winter evening, years after that fateful day, Hank stood outside Trump Tower once again. The towering structure loomed above him, its golden letters gleaming in the city lights. He was no longer the desperate man clutching a paper cup. He was a leader, an advocate, and a symbol of what was possible when opportunity met determination. As he gazed up at the building, a young man approached him, shivering and hesitant. "Sir," the man said, his voice barely audible, "can you spare $1?" Hank smiled, reaching into his pocket. But instead of handing over a bill, he said, "How about I give you something better than $1?" Hank gazed into the young man's eyes, recognizing the same weariness, fear, and silent plea for hope that he had carried in his own reflection for so many years. This wasn't just an opportunity to pay it forward, it was a test of how far he had come and what kind of impact he could now make. He crouched slightly to meet the man at eye level, softening his voice to match the gravity of the moment. "Let's start with your name," Hank said gently, holding out his hand. The young man hesitated, shifting his weight nervously. "It's Jamie," he said finally, his voice shaking. "Jamie," Hank said with a nod. "I've been where you are. I've stood on this very street wondering if anyone would see me as more than just another person in need. What I'm about to tell you might sound hard to believe, but I want you to trust me. Can you do that?" Jamie nodded, his expression torn between disbelief and cautious hope. Hank handed him a business card with the name of his nonprofit emblazoned across it, Second Step Solutions. The organization had become Hank's passion project, an extension of his journey, providing housing and employment opportunities to those who needed it most. "I run this place," Hank said, "and if you show up tomorrow at 8 a.m., I promise we'll figure out a way to get you back on your feet. You don't have to go through this alone anymore." Tears welled up in Jamie's eyes as he clutched the card. "You'd really help me? Just like that?" "Just like that," Hank said, though he knew it wasn't as simple as it sounded. Helping someone climb out of homelessness required more than kind words or a single meeting. It required patience, resources, and unwavering support. But Hank believed in Jamie's potential because someone had once believed in his. That night, Hank reflected on how his journey had prepared him for moments like this. In the years since his life had turned around, he had witnessed countless stories of transformation. Some people flourished immediately when given a chance, while others stumbled repeatedly, battling demons of addiction, mental illness, or sheer hopelessness. Hank knew that Jamie's path wouldn't be linear, but that didn't deter him. He had learned that progress wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. The following morning, Hank arrived at the Second Step Solutions office early, eager to see if Jamie would show up. The organization's headquarters was a modest yet inviting space, filled with the energy of people striving to rebuild their lives. The walls were adorned with photos and testimonials from individuals who had benefited from the programs. A single mother who now ran her own small business, a veteran who had found purpose in mentoring others, and even a few former employees who had moved on to thriving careers. At exactly 8 a.m., Jamie walked through the door. His eyes darted nervously around the room, his hands trembling as he clutched the business card Hank had given him. Hank greeted him with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Welcome, Jamie," Hank said. "Today is the first step. Let's get started." Hank personally guided Jamie through the intake process, introducing him to the team and explaining the resources available. Jamie would have access to temporary housing, counseling, and job training programs designed to address not just immediate needs, but the long-term barriers to stability. In the weeks that followed, Hank saw Jamie transform in ways that reminded him of his own journey. The young man began to walk with more confidence, his shoulders no longer hunched under the weight of despair. He excelled in the job training workshops, demonstrating a knack for logistics and problem solving. Hank took Jamie under his wing, mentoring him and sharing lessons he had learned during his own rise from the streets. One day, as they worked together on a community outreach initiative, Jamie turned to Hank with a question that caught him off guard. "How did you do it?" Jamie asked. "How did you go from where I was to where you are now?" Hank paused, the weight of the question settling over him. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "There were days when I wanted to give up, when it felt like the world was stacked against me. But I learned that the hardest battles aren't fought out there, they're fought in here." He tapped his chest. "You have to believe that you're capable of more, even when everything in your life is telling you otherwise." Jamie nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think about the man who helped you? Donald Trump?" Hank smiled, a mixture of gratitude and reflection crossing his face. "I think about him often, not because of who he is, but because of what he taught me about seizing opportunities. Meeting him changed my life. But the real work started after that. It was up to me to make something of the chance he gave me. As Jamie continued to progress, Hank's nonprofit grew in scope and impact. He expanded Second Step Solutions to new cities, partnering with local governments and businesses to create innovative programs that address the root causes of homelessness. One of his proudest accomplishments was the launch of a mentorship initiative, where individuals who had successfully transitioned out of homelessness could guide others through the process. Jamie became one of the program's first mentors, using his own story to inspire others to keep fighting. Meanwhile, Hank's professional life remained intertwined with Trump's organization. Over the years, he had become a trusted advisor and an advocate for social responsibility within the company. Though Trump himself was a polarizing figure, Hank admired his willingness to support initiatives that made a tangible difference. Their relationship evolved from one of benefactor and beneficiary to something closer to mutual respect. Hank's work didn't come without challenges. As Second Step Solutions grew, so did the scrutiny. Critics questioned whether his association with Trump undermined the authenticity of his mission, while others accused him of using his story for personal gain. Hank faced these criticisms head-on, emphasizing that his focus was always on the people he served. "I don't care about politics or public opinion," Hank said in an interview with a major news outlet. "What matters to me is making sure that no one has to go through what I went through. If my story can help open doors for others, then it's worth it." Despite the noise, Hank's impact was undeniable. Over the next decade, Second Step Solutions helped thousands of individuals transition out of homelessness, offering not just temporary relief, but sustainable paths to independence. Hank became a sought-after speaker, sharing his insights at conferences, universities, and corporate events. His memoir, $1, One Chance: My Journey from the Streets to Success, became a bestseller, further cementing his legacy as a symbol of resilience and hope. One evening, as Hank prepared for a keynote speech at a national leadership summit, he received an unexpected call. It was from Donald Trump. Though their interactions had become less frequent over the years, the call brought a rush of memories. "How's life treating you, Hank?" Trump's unmistakable voice boomed through the phone. "Busy, but good," Hank replied, smiling. "I've been thinking about how far we both come since that day on the street. That makes two of us," Trump said. "Listen, I wanted to let you know I'm proud of what you've done. Not many people would have taken the chance I gave you and turned it into what you have." The conversation was brief but meaningful, a reminder of the unlikely connection that had set Hank's journey in motion. As Hank hung up the phone, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His story wasn't just about his own transformation. It was a testament to the power of human connection, the ripple effect of a single moment of generosity. As the years went on, Hank continued to dedicate his life to helping others. He never forgot where he had come from or the people who had shaped his journey. Every dollar he raised, every life he touched, and every barrier he broke was a reminder of the potential within all of us to rise above even the darkest circumstances. And so, on a cold winter evening, as the city buzzed with its usual energy, Hank found himself standing once again outside Trump Tower. This time, he wasn't looking for a miracle. He was looking for the next Jamie, the next person whose life he could help change, knowing that the cycle of hope and opportunity would continue, one step at a time. Standing outside Trump Tower that winter evening, Hank felt the familiar tug of memory of that pivotal moment when a simple request for help had set his life on an entirely new trajectory. But this time, he wasn't a man in need. He was a man with the power to help. As he leaned against a lamppost watching the streams of people passing by, Hank thought about how his life had become a testament to transformation and persistence. He glanced down at his watch. It was nearly time for a meeting with a group of young entrepreneurs from Second Step Solution, individuals he had mentored over the years. Each of them carried their own stories of hardship and resilience, stories that reminded Hank of his own. Tonight, they were gathering at a nearby community center to celebrate the grand opening of a new transitional housing facility, a project Hank had championed tirelessly. The housing facility, called The Bridge, was a state-of-the-art complex designed to provide not only shelter but also education, job training, and mental health services. It was the culmination of years of fundraising, advocacy, and collaboration. Hank had poured his heart into the project, determined to create a space that addressed the deeper challenges of homelessness, rather than just offering a temporary fix. For him, the bridge represented more than a building. It was a beacon of hope. As he entered the community center, Hank was greeted by applause and handshakes. Familiar faces beamed at him. Former clients of Second Step Solutions, colleagues, volunteers, and community leaders who had supported the project. Hank was ushered to the front of the room where a microphone awaited him. He took a deep breath, scanning the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady and full of warmth. Tonight, we're not just celebrating the opening of a building. We're celebrating the power of belief. Belief in ourselves, in each other, and in the idea that no matter how far someone has fallen, they can rise again with the right support. The room erupted in applause. Hank paused, letting the moment sink in. He continued, "When I look at all of you, I see a reflection of what's possible. I see people who refused to give up, who fought for something better, even when the odds were stacked against them. And that fight, that spirit, is what drives everything we do at Second Step Solutions. The bridge isn't just a place to live. It's a place to grow, to rebuild, and to rediscover the potential that lies within each of us." After the speech, Hank mingled with the crowd, taking time to speak with as many people as he could. He saw Jamie, now a confident young man leading outreach programs for the nonprofit, laughing with a group of new residents. He saw mentors connecting with mentees, volunteers discussing plans for future initiatives, and community leaders brainstorming ways to expand the impact of the bridge. As the evening wound down, Hank stepped outside into the cold night air. The city sparkled around him, its energy as electric as ever. He thought about how far he had come, from a man on the streets asking for $1 to someone helping to build futures for others. And yet, he knew the journey wasn't over. There were still more lives to touch, more bridges to build, and more opportunities to create. Hank turned his collar up against the wind and began walking, his heart full of gratitude and determination. Somewhere out there, another life waited to be changed. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a homeless man asking Donald Trump for $1? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.